Hi. We'll try to make it fast and catch up so that...
Okay, we go out to lunch then.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. You're not hungry. Okay, so thank you for being here. My name is Xavier René-Corail. I'm the Senior Director for the GitHub Security Lab, and I'm honored to host this panel today with very fine panelists. The subject of making security easy for developers is very close to my heart because this is what I'm trying to do at the GitHub Security Lab, make security easy for developers. We're doing that for open source developers, but of course, the subject is general to all developers. My job today will be super easy. I will ask the difficult questions, and they will give the smart answers. So I'm excited to welcome our three panelists, and I will let them introduce themselves and tell us how they connect to this subject.
Hello, my name is Frida, and I work as a security engineer for Mozilla. And the subject is also very close to my heart because this is mainly what I do at Mozilla, and I try to be there for the developers and make security easier for them. And I also worked as a developer, so I could empathize with them and know what they go through.
Yeah, same. So, hello, my name is Marie. I work at Otto, and I'm a security engineer turned product manager. And we mainly do the same, right? Otto is one of the leading e-commerce companies in Europe, and so I work in the team that helps make sure that our online shop stays secure. But as you said, right, the developers are the ones who actually have to write, maintain, operate software securely, and we just help them do that. And we actually do a bunch of different things in order to achieve that, from running our own security community, which is primarily focused on the security champions, to trying to bring security into every phase of the software development lifecycle. And the same as you guys, something I'm really passionate about is how to make security easier for developers, because it's at the heart of everything that we do, I think.
Hey everyone, so my name is Santosh. I work as a senior software engineer at Celonis. And I'm a developer, yeah. So, and apart from that, I'm a Google developer expert for Angular. So, work primarily in the front end. And I'm a GitHub star, so that's how I got the chance to be here. So, and security is of course a very critical topic as a developer. And how many are developers here? Just to see. Very few. Okay.
4.
So this is for you guys.
Well, okay, I will put myself on the developer side also to try to establish some balance. Okay. Welcome again, and let's dig into our first question. So in a typical organization setup, right, you have a security team who is in charge of detecting vulnerabilities and or risks, and then collaborate with the engineering team to have them addressed, right? So, and I hear that it can cause some inefficiencies, frustrations, and even conflicts, especially when it's detected late into the development lifecycle. So my first question for you is, okay, what's your magic recipe to to have an efficient, effective collaboration between security teams and development teams when you detect a vulnerability? Who wants to take it first? Mary?
Yeah, I can go first. I think so far as there is something as a magic recipe, right? It's communication. So I think it's really important to be very transparent in the way you communicate, especially if you're part of a security team, to your developers, right? Your requirements, the way you expect them to do things, that needs to be super clear right off the bat. And then the other part of communication is listening, which might be the one that's even more important, right? You need to listen to your developers. You need to get them what they need.
At Mozilla, we try our best to do risk assessments and design reviews as early as possible during the design and before the implementation phase. We have a framework, we call it rapid risk assessments, which is supposed to be very quick, so we don't put too much pressure and take too much time out of the developers' days to do the assessment. and we document all the risks and the needed medications to handle those risks. And we also try to communicate all of these processes and these things for the developers. And that's one of the challenges that we are trying to solve, which is to make these resources available for everyone so they could know about it, so they can reach out to us as soon as they are trying to implement a new feature or a product or anything like that. So as Marie mentioned, like communication and listening is very important to have those developers aware of those services that we provide.
So same at Celonis also, we try to actually take care of it at design phase. So we discuss about it, and believe me, most of the developers are frustrated in those meetings because security team will tell you, okay, you cannot do this and you cannot do that. But it's for your own good, right? I mean, it's not like that they don't want you to write code. They want you to write code, but they want you to be like write secure code, which is hard to teach, right? Anyways. But but as a developer, you can actually do few things. For example, the easiest thing which you can do is, of course, if you're using front end, you can just put an audit check on your CI/CD. No one is stopping you from doing that, right? And it's like, rather than catching those vulnerabilities very late, you can actually do it daily while writing a new code or installing a new package from the NPM, right? For example, when you are choosing any packages, just make sure that those packages are very secure or well maintained. Don't try to fall into any trap because there are billions of those packages on NPM, right? And if you just misplace even a single character, you will probably download some packages and that may not be secure. So make sure, okay, you are going through all those checks before you go ahead and try to implement some new feature, or you suggest those packages to your team. Apart from that, you can do is code scanning. Of course, GitHub has CodeQL, which is already available. Of course, it's paid for enterprises, but it's a very good tool. You can implement that. Keep and watch on the security vulnerabilities on your project-related stuff. For example, if you're using any front-end tool, for example, React or Angular, just check if they have any security vulnerabilities and try to be on top of it rather than actually catching it very late once you're in production.
Thank you. Yes, you want to?
Yeah, I would actually like to add something to that because I think it's really important, like Frida said, to try to bring security in every phase of the software development lifecycle, right? You start in the design phase, maybe you do threat modeling, you do a lot of maybe automated scanning, right? In the implementation phase, maybe you also do some stuff in the maintenance or in the operating phase. Because that gives you the opportunity to find stuff like more often, right? And so teams don't get frustrated. And I think what's also really important is to put the responsibility onto the teams in a way that they feel like they have agency, right? Like we don't run a security scanning tool that the teams can see their own results. So they can look into the dashboards and they can try to figure out how to improve the security of their source code. And it's not us coming to them and they're like, why is this all red? Like, what are you guys doing, right? It's important to make them feel like it's part of their responsibility, but also to give them agency. And then what I also think is really super important is like talk to your teams also when nothing is wrong, right? If the only time you talk to your developers is when something is wrong, they're not going to have a positive experience with you. You might also want to talk to them when things are going really well, right? And tell them that. And just like have friendly conversations.
That's very interesting because, so there is one case where this will not happen. And I will turn to you, Santosh, because in organizations, in enterprises, yes, you will have this communication between security teams and developers, and you will be able to have that, right? But you're an open source maintainer, Santosh. And in your case, so you don't have the luxury to have a security team telling you, hey, what you're doing is great. So you usually get an external security researcher reporting you a bug, right? But no one is telling you, hey, this is what you're doing is good, etc. So yeah, in the case of open source, how does it happen? What do you like in this process of getting vulnerability reports from external security teams? And what would you like to happen better?
Yeah, it's very hard, right? And I know most of the security researchers here don't like open source at all. I spoke to a few and they're like, okay, it's open source, so it's not secure. But believe me, as an open source maintainer, we don't want to push security researchers away. It's not what we want to do. But most of the open source projects are actually frustrated by this bug bounty hunters, right? There are bad actors everywhere. I'm not saying it's only in security researchers or bug bounty team, but yeah, there are some open source projects also which did which were harmful to the community as well. But the kind of reports we get is like, okay, we're really frustrated because most of them bug bounty hunters, they just spam us because they probably want to just get some money out of it. So that's where the open source community is very frustrated right now. But there are many security researchers who are actually doing a great job. I mean, I really kudos to the GitHub security team for providing so many good tools, especially CodeQL, so we can actually run the code scanning on our own code base without like having any interaction from anyone else. And apart from that, I think the good feature which is recently launched is like disclosing the vulnerabilities privately. So if you do really care about it, I mean, secure, like discuss it with the maintainers, right? So they can like have some trust in you as well, that you really care about it. That's why you try to report it privately, not you are going publicly with this all vulnerabilities which you have found. So, and apart from that, of course, if you are reporting it, just make sure that it has the correct versions, right? Most of the time it's missing that, okay, which version you are talking about. And then you have, most of the open source projects, they have their own templates. Try to follow that template. It will be really helpful because not all open source projects are same, right? So, yeah, these are a few things which I can.
Is any one of other panelists want to say something about this open source concern? Okay. So let's move on to an important subject of education and knowledge sharing, because of course one key success factor for us is our ability to learn from our mistakes and not repeat the same error again and again and again. So how do you educate developers about secure code? Do you incorporate that into the remediation activity, or do you have a separate learning path, or both?
So I manage the Web Bug Bounty program at Mozilla, and when I receive a report of a security vulnerability, I work with developers closely to validate and remediate the issues. And we also help them if they need anything, like how to address the issue, how to avoid it, and so on. And we are also in the process of sharing the reports that we receive and the vulnerabilities with our developers, so that they could learn from those mistakes, and then they could also look for vulnerable patterns in their code bases. We also run, I find like brown bags and security trainings that are not super formal, that are hands-on and practical. They are very useful for developers to learn about secure coding and practices and so on. And also just to show our faces and be around the developers is very important. Because like when you know that there's like a security person in the office, or I know this person on Slack and I could talk to them, I could approach them, ask them questions, just ad hoc, not necessarily in a formal way or anything. It helps because they would be thinking about their code, how they want to design it, how they want to implement it, and then they will come to us and they will ask us like, what is the more secure way of doing this and that. So I find this very helpful to be there for the developers and help them out.
Yeah, definitely. I think at Otto we do the same thing, right? And I like what you said about being approachable. That's so important. We have 2 mandatory trainings that all our developers have to go through. And the first one it's basically awareness, right? It's not how to not get phished. So I mean, most people, especially if you come from an IT background, they kind of know that. But it's really important for us that they go through that training so that they can get to know us. And then if they have a problem, they know, they remember I talked to this person once, and they're way more likely to talk to you than if you just like some kind of anonymous email somewhere. So that's really important. And then what we also do is we try to focus our education on our security champions, right? So every development team has one security champion, and they are not responsible for everything that has to do with security, but they're the first point of contact for us. And so we give them more training than we give everybody else, so that we're not trying to train everybody, and we can like focus more on what they actually need. Yeah.
I think it's pretty much covered that.
Okay, I will have you talk, Santosh. So, because again, open source projects often don't have the same luxury as enterprises to have funding for all time, for training, for learning, and but I know that there are many available learning sources free for open source. I'm thinking about the OWASP projects. I'm thinking about the courses from the Open Source Security Foundation. But I can see that they are not well known and used by open source developers. So you, as an open source maintainer and as someone who is also involved in some learning initiatives, what is missing? What is missing for open source developers to have access to these, to know, to be aware of these, and to use them?
I think it's hard, right? So as I mentioned, security itself is a very hard concept to teach. I mean, I've been writing code for like more than 15 years, and I still go back to those documents and see what's the standard practice and what is not. So I think this is where all the frameworks, right, which you use. So the framework should actually reduce the knowledge which you need to have. For example, Angular has many things which is already built in, the security related things which is already built in, or any framework which you choose, they already have some securities. Like for example, React has some level of security built in. They should reduce the knowledge gap. But I mean, to educate the open source developers, remember, most of the open source developers don't wanted to do that. I mean, they don't wanted their projects to be like used by millions of developers. That's the hobby project they started, and somehow they are responsible for now answering billion-dollar companies why this project has security vulnerabilities. So I think the best thing as a community which we can do is, of course, come up and share your learnings which you have as a security researchers, right? That's where which can help. I'm talking about GitHub a lot, but I really appreciate the QL code scanning which is there, so developers know during their like development phase that okay, there is some security vulnerabilities, and they run CI/CD pipeline as of course, for sure, right? Most of the open source developers do, because it's free anyways, and it helps us to automate stuff. So those are the things which are helping us to learn new things. As I said, most of the open source developers are not, and many of them, like, they just started it as a hobby project because they wanted to learn something. Many of them are not even someone with a bachelor's degree or engineer's degree. You'll find many of the open source developers doing that, right? So I think it's our initiative which should be there. And I think GitHub is also like trying to come up with more initiatives to teach open source developers how to make more secure developers, more secure projects, or more secure open source projects. So yep, I think as a community we can win. Otherwise it will be really hard for everyone.
Thanks.
Can I add so I think also it's important for the frameworks and the libraries that we use are well documented, and the security features are very well documented. Like if you need to do this securely, then highlight how to make these things securely, because oftentimes like the tutorials and on the internet, they actually like have the insecure methods of doing things, which is the problem. So I think like we also need to pay attention to the documentation for those frameworks.
So this morning in James' keynote, he highlighted that tooling can be also used for sharing knowledge. So my question for you is, okay, what are the characteristics of a good tool, so that this tool can support what we just discussed before, like collaboration between security and engineering and knowledge sharing?
So it's very important for those tools to be integrated into the developer's workflow, so we don't add extra burden on the developers or any extra work that they need to do. Like we need to go to them and help them with those tools. So like ideally we would need to run, for example, if we want to run static analysis, we would run it even before the code is committed. So therefore the tool needs to be quick to run so that we don't add any extra time to the build time or anything like that. And another way that I like to do is if I'm running a static code analysis or any type of scanning on my application, to add, for example, the results as comments in the pull requests, which helps like highlight the issues that need to be addressed and so on. So it's very important to have a low like a high positive or low false positive rate in the tool, so that we don't like overwhelm the developers with false positives and all of that. So those are very important things that we need to consider with the tools.
So for me, this is actually the most important part. No false positives. Because once you have even a very small number, right, 2 or 3, your developers are going to stop using those tools. And once they leave, you won't get them back. Like maybe not all of them, but most of them. So that's the most important point for me. And like, I'm not trying to like sell your product here, right? But we started using GitHub Advanced Security, and we actually liked it a lot because it has so little or so few false positives. And let me just tell you an example of this, because I think it highlights how little there actually are. So we started using those, right? And one of the parts of GitHub Advanced Security is secret scanning. And secret scanning, you just turn it on, right? There's no setup, you just turn it on. And then our teams turned it on and they didn't get any results. And we had teams like call us and like ask us, does this actually work? This is weird. There aren't any results. Like, that's strange. Because there aren't any false positives with that. And so that's super, super important to me. Yeah. And then I think from a security team perspective, you want tools that work for your developers, but kind of sort of you also want them to work well for you, right? So there has to be some kind of like security team features where you have an overview of all the findings in an organization, for example, and you can link them back very quickly to the team who is working on that and stuff like that. So you kind of want to have both of these things in the same tool.
I don't have anything to add. So
okay.
Okay, yeah. I want to double down on what you said about having the result of the tooling included into the developer's workflow. This is really, really important. You don't want your developers to go to yet another system, or to quit their IDE, or to quit their browser that they are already using. Yeah, I remember a former colleague, 5-6 years ago, telling me, "Oh wow, this security product has improved a lot, and instead of generating a PDF of security issues, now it will create a bunch of Jira issues for my developers. They will love it." I said, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." Well, guess what? They didn't love it at all. But yes, we want this result included into what they are already using, indeed, and agree also on these tools. You must have 2 views, right? One for developers with 0 false positives, and one for security teams with 0 false negatives, right? Security teams will triage the noise, don't worry, but developers, they don't like that. If they see something that is red, that is not a real red, well, the next time they see a red, they will pass, right? It's like, a traffic light that has a false red light. They will pass. They will ignore it for sure. So now let's talk about open source. 90% of companies report that they are using open source in their own software, right? This is a fantastic accelerator for software development because you can reuse libraries instead of reinventing the wheel, right? And so we can argue that it's the same for security, right? Instead of rewriting code, you can use a secure library that already exists, right? But I also hear, on the other hand, that people don't want to delegate, this accountability to an open source project or maintainers that they don't know, right? Think Log4Shell, right? Log4j is from the Apache Software Foundation, one of the most ubiquitous libraries in the Java world, and still it exposed hundreds of thousands of organizations to Log4Shell. So my question for you, and it's a hard one, is, okay, open source for security, is it an opportunity or a risk? Or is it both? And if it's both, how do you approach this duality?
No.
And very hard question. Okay, so I would always consider open source as an opportunity for everyone, because remember, companies are actually saving billions of dollars because they are saving open source. So I think what you have to do is, as an organization, you have to stand up. You have to come forward and help the open source community, rather than just saying that we are responsible for some vulnerabilities in your system. So Log4j example you mentioned, it was actually maintained by one or two amazing developers, right? So those two developers are actually responsible for your billion-dollar company, and then they get nothing. They actually were not supported by any organization unless that vulnerability came up. So I think stand up or start supporting as an organization to all the open source projects which you are using. And I had an interesting idea. Actually, I wrote about it a few years back. Of course, no one knew me that time in the open source community, but yeah, I wrote about it anyways. So the idea was to actually invest some of your resources. So organization has huge resources, right? Of course, they have thousands of developers working for them. And I'm really glad that big organizations like Microsoft, Google, and GitHub, and they are actually investing their own resources in maintaining, supporting those open source software developers. But the companies which are making thousands of billions of dollars, they are actually not. So what you can do is try to actually assign few resources from your team, like helping for a day. For example, my company give me half a day. Whatever I want to do, I can do that. Whether I want to do open source, I want to write blog posts, I want to do anything, I can do that. So if you come up with same initiative in your company, I think that will help. So if you just ask one of your developers, hey, let's do one thing. On Fridays, what you will do is, you will just work on the open source side of our libraries which you use, or any framework we use. Try to see if there are some issues we can help with, or try to, whatever you learned in your 4 days of work, just try to help those libraries. That was an interesting idea, but I don't think so that is very feasible, or many companies would like to follow that. But even if you as a developer is getting that half a day, for example, many companies do that. They do that. So if you can invest your half day into helping some open source projects or developers, you just help them, right? They are saving your time. They are not they don't want money from you. They are just like a hobby project which they started. They thought that can help many developers out there, and it is helping you at the end. So it's opportunity for everyone. I think this also has an advantage for organization if they start doing it. Everyone wants a good resource, right? So they need highly skilled resources. And from where you get those resources? Of course, most of them are actually contributing to open source. So if you have someone who is contributing to open source in your organization, so I think he can teach others, right? So he's value addition for your team, and what you have to do is just give him half a day to explore things. And as a developer, I think what else you can do is GitHub sponsors program. It's best. I think as an organization, you can also support some open source projects, or as an individual, you can support. If you think you use some library and that library help you to reduce your work by let's say half a day or a day, $5 doesn't cost you anything, right? You can, of course, give $5 back to those developers, and they will make sure that you get the value by, they can invest more time in supporting the work they are doing, right? And I think I have a lot to talk about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything, and that open source is an opportunity. and we only need to fund and support the people who work on it. And there are so many initiatives that also provide security services for open source projects. We also had one of these initiatives, and we also tried to audit some popularly used frameworks and libraries. What else to say? And it's also very like this challenge is also similar to many security teams at even enterprises, large enterprises. Like the security teams are always understaffed and all of that. So I think like both open source and security teams everywhere need more support, and so it's not just open source projects that could be risky.
Something to add? Okay, yes, I'm definitely supportive of what you said about how companies can contribute back to open source, right? If you feel like, okay, this is helping you, this is accelerating, but at the same time you're not sure about the security, then you can invest in those. And the examples that you mentioned, like Google, for example, with OSS First, but I mean, we have invested so much into open source, but Microsoft and GitHub, that what Mozilla did also for open source. Yes, this is the kind of thing that you can do if you really believe that open source can help you, but you are a bit afraid of the accountability for the security. Then yes, invest in that. And one thing that you said also, which is, I mean, the best thing that you can do is indeed tell your security teams to contribute to these projects, because not only it gives them additional resources and time, but also the knowledge, right? The knowledge will transpire from your security team into the maintainers of this open source project. So, yeah. I think that, we should now open the, open questions to the audience. Yeah, to our panelists.
Thanks. What's your take on learning new technologies that are considered to be more secure and investing precious time of developers on those things? Like the classic example would be C or C++ versus Rust. That's probably the elephant in the room that everyone keeps talking about.
So just talking for the corporate world, right? I think that's a great idea, but not something that you can get through. Like, that's just not going to happen. We're not going to, like, transform our whole platform to a more secure language, because no manager is ever going to okay that. So I think instead it's really important to try to educate developers and do that in a kind of like automated way. So I think we've been talking about security scanning, right? And I really like that, because if you use code scanning tools, for example, your developers will learn while they fix the findings. Because, for example, GitHub Advanced Security Code Scanning provides you a ton of information when you have a finding. And so when you run through that a couple of times, hopefully the next time you won't make that mistake again. So I think that's a better way to improve than trying to have like the Herculean task almost to like switch to a different language. Yeah.
I can ask.
Sure.
Of course, you know more than me about teaching and all this stuff, but what I have seen is when you try to introduce a new technology into the team, right? So you have to check with the team what they're comfortable with, and most of them are not. I mean, C and C++, believe me, when I learned C in my second year of engineering, I was like, okay, this programming thing is not for me. So I just wanted to give it up. So yeah.
Yes, I think that, so there, in the Open Source Security Foundation, for example, there is a stream where we are trying to push for at least awareness that, hey, you can use these memory safe languages, etc., for example. But I think it's important, and I rebound on what you said, it's also important to educate. I mean, I would prefer to educate developers on all things security rather than tell them, hey, there is a magic thing here. You can use this language instead, and then everything will disappear. This is not true. So yes, I would definitely prefer to developers to be aware that, hey, with this language or this technology, it will be, the defaults are safer than the defaults of this other technology. Yes, I want people to be aware of that, but I don't want to push that as a magic wand for everyone, if that makes sense.
All right. So my question is, now that we have shifted security left as much as possible, we have burned the developers with a lot of work. Then it comes privacy, we shift that, then developers need to know human rights, legal, all of that stuff. So how have you dealt with the tension of shifting all that work to the developers? Is there still something that we can do from the security teams to, let's say, hey, you know about this issue, we have this covered, don't worry. So how have you found this balance?
So I think it's a work in progress, right? Like we're still trying to find that balance. But I think, so whenever you can centralize stuff, right? And then offer that as a service for developers so that they still need to obviously work with their own code, but maybe they don't need to set up their own code scanning somewhere, right? That doesn't make any sense. And then what we try to always offer help, right? It goes back to like being approachable. It's not just saying like, you have to do this and you have to do that. And no, like, yeah, you kind of have to do that. But if whenever you need help, come and ask us, right? And we will be there with you every step of the way. I think what's even more important, and kind of you asked about this too, is right. It's not just security. It's all the other non-functional requirements too. And now when it gets kind of tricky, and for me, that's something that like management needs to decide that, because I think at the end of the day, what we need to remember is you can't put all of that on developers. That doesn't work. They need to have a prioritized list because their day only has like 8 hours, 9 hours maybe. And so you can't just be like, just do this, do that, do this, and then let them figure it out. No, you need to help them understand what they need to do.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I will add. I mean, I totally agree with what Mary said. As you can tell, I'm a bit older than this panelist here, and so what you describe, I heard it 15 years ago, like developers saying, "Oh, you want me to test now?" And then, "Oh, you want me to deploy now?" You know, and now, "Oh, you want me to write secure code now?" So it takes time, but eventually, yes, it happens. And for me, the two things that are really helping for that is what she said. First, automation, right? And second, the testers and then the ops and then the security teams, right? They should move from a role where they were telling developers, hey, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, fix that, to a role of expert, assisting developers, helping developers, teaching developers, etc. So they kind of become, teachers of these developers to do that.
Yeah, security and privacy are shared responsibility for everyone. So we need to make them not an extra thing that people have to do. It's just part of their work. So part of the culture and the mindset that we need to write secure code. We need to not collect as many data as we can, just what we need, and so on. So these are things that should be in our mindset when we develop products.
So it seems to me that there is a bit of you have to sort of choose between, this shared mindset and sometimes enforcement. So, there's a relationship and negotiation between the security people and the developers and probably many other people. And then there's this other mindset, which is more traditional, sort of, let's enforce security, right? And make sure everything is top secure. Where do you stand? Where, what's the right balance?
It depends on your situation, right? No, but so for me, because I work in the security team, and I think that we are in the middle between the developers and the management, and kind of what you described, right? Management is like, no, let's make everything top secure, and developers are like, we can't work like that. And so we're in the middle, and we're exactly trying to find that balance and trying to mediate between these two sides. And so this is like at the heart of the matter, you won't be able to fix that, right? Some things, they need to be required, and they're like governance things, you just have to do them. But on the other hand, and this is where I think communication comes back in, and building a relationship to your developers, we're also trying to teach management and stop them from going crazy, right? We're like, you can't do that to our developers. Like, you need to roll this back. We need to find a different way. And I think for us, the only way that we have found to make this work is by exactly doing that, building relationships. Because when my developers trust me that I will have their best interests at heart, they will do the things that they absolutely have to do, but they will also trust me that I will stop management from going crazy and putting everything into Jira tickets.
So, are you saying that security people should be negotiators or, middlemen?
Well, you don't have to be, but I think it's helpful.
I agree. Thank you.
I would like to add also that for me the answer was in your question, because you asked how do you find the balance. Well, how do you find the balance? There is no.
Yeah, I guess I was fishing.
You try. You find a balance. You try a bit left. Okay, no, a bit right, and then you finally find the balance, right? But it's like this. You figure it out exactly.
Thanks.
Okay, I would like to thank my panelists. I'm very proud of them, and it's their first panel. So, big round of applause for them, please. I would also like to thank Nullcon for acknowledging my idea of putting more development into security conference, and I'm trying to do the same in the other way, but a bit complicated. Now I would like some closing words from my panelists.
Thank you for listening, and thanks for joining us for this panel.
Yeah, totally what she said. But also, I think, listen to your developers, right? Security, it's a community effort. Let's try and do better together.
First of all, thank you. I mean, this is my first security conference, and I was really amazed by the contents which was delivered. I mean, of course, as a developer, we focus not much on the security part, which is, of course, most of the time, as she mentioned, right, we have 8 hours. So we try to do our best in 8 hours. And it was learning curve for me as well. So I'll try to take something back from this conference and try to implement in my work and open source projects as well. So, and thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge as well.